Hi guys, here we are back again with chapter 10 talking about organizational change and innovation. Um, we've talked before about the importance of change. We talked about that when we talked about culture and types of organizations that are adaptive to change or are adaptive and therefore able to change to keep up with what's going on in the environment. But change is a funny thing because when you ask people if they want to change, everyone says yes. But when you say who wants to change, everyone says no. So it's kind of a challenge for managers, and we're going to talk about ways to get around that and reasons people are afraid of change and how to manage it. Okay, let's see. Sorry about that. Let me just switch this a little bit. I apologize. Okay, so when you are uh, when you're a manager, there's a couple of different things that you might be called upon to take care to deal with. So one place is the market becomes more segmented. So um, you need to have more niche products. So for example, with Amazon and Apple, um, they can offer since they're not limited to shelf space, they can offer consumers a much wider variety of products, um, and small sales can produce big profits. More competition requires you to offer more targeted products for faster speed to market. So, um, one another example is that Virgin Group, the airlines, known mainly for its music and airline businesses, but it's entered around 400 new businesses, one after the other: mobile phones, credit cards, hotels, games, trains, and one after the other. I'm sorry, and the most recently foot races and cruise ships to add to all done very quickly. So you need to be have to respond quickly. So then there's also there's this whole idea of innovation, and some people say it's really difficult for an existing successful company to take full advantage of a technological breakthrough such as digitization. So what you have to get through is this whole idea of disruptive innovation. So making something so unusual and remarkable that people will want it. Um, Next, offshore suppliers are changing the way we work, and so we need to constantly be embracing um, things from globalization, and then also this whole idea that the knowledge worker, is becoming really much more prevalent as opposed to the manufacturing, particularly in our economy. Manufacturing worker. Okay, two types of change. Reactive change is when when you respond to things that have occurred. Something's already happened. You're trying to play catch up. Proactive is when there's some kind of plan change, and you have to strategize and think about that and almost develop. Come up with come up with an idea before someone else does. It's really when you're very successful in monitoring the external market environment. Okay, so there are essentially two categories of change that are going to cause force. Outside forces, things outside of the environment, outside of your own internal environment, and then inside forces. So outside forces, of course, demographic changes. Demographics is the objective ways to measure a population in terms of age, education, gender, income, that kind of thing. Technological advancement, of course, companies now are always trying to keep up with that. Um, Shareholder, customer, and market changes. So, what is it that customers are looking for? What is it that shareholders are looking for? Changes in the marketing environment in terms of availability of supplies and changes in what's going on with your competitors. And then social and political pressures in terms of uh, what's going on culturally. Oh, I'm sorry. And then inside forces, if there's human resource concerns, so um, changes in uh, changes in your workforce, and then management behavior in terms of there's some kind of organization or there's some kind of conflict that's occurring between some of your leadership and also in changes in leadership as well at the top. All right, so types and models of change. There's essentially 3 types of change: adaptive, innovative, and radically innovative. So adaptive change is this idea that coming up with something that's similar to a similar product to what you have, but having it just meet what the current needs are. Innovative change is something that is completely new to the organization, completely changing around. So, for example, if a department store decides to adapt a new practice of competitors by staying open 24 hours a day, it would require employees to work more flexible schedules, and it may be felt as moderately threatening. Okay, and then very threatening, or in terms of people's response to it, radically innovative change. So that would be something that is completely different to what's going on and very disruptive to your workers and to management, and also perhaps shocking for your employees. All right, so there's a model for changes. It's that Lewin's model. It's this idea of unfreezing, changing, and then refreezing. So unfreezing is getting rid of the old behavior. Changing is introducing the new behavior, and then refreezing is making sure that new change is solidified within the organization. So essentially, in the unfreezing stage, managers try to instill in employees the motivation to change, encourage them to let go of attitudes and behaviors that are resistant to innovation. So for this kind of unfreezing to take place, employees need to become dissatisfied with the old way of doing things, and managers also need to reduce the barriers to change during the stage. So the managers really have to be proactive in dealing with their employees and smoothing it out. So in the changing stage, employees need to be given tools for change, new information, new perspective, new models of behavior. Managers can help here by providing benchmarking results, role models, mentors, experts, and training. Experts say it's advisable to convey the idea that change is a continuous learning process, not just a one-time event. So you go back to this learning organization idea that people are open to change and open to new things. And then in the refreezing stage, employees need to be helped to integrate the changed attitudes and behavior into their normal ways of doing things. And managers can assist by encouraging employees to exhibit the new change, and then through additional coaching and modeling by reinforcing the employees in the desired change. So it's important, this whole idea of it has to be, the key to it really is to have a plan, and then also provide your employees with as much support as possible to get them to where they want to go, where you want them to go. So again, we've talked more about inputs, transformation, and outputs. So what are some of the inputs? It could be the mission, vision, the plan, and also whether or not you're ready to change. And then you target what's important. How are you going to go about it? Is it the people? Is it the methods? How are you going to do that? And then outputs is, what is it that you're hoping to get? Okay, there's a whole field. It's a very growing field. It's called organizational development. And organizational development really focuses specifically on people in the change process. Some scholars apply the term organizational development to techniques designed to improve organizational effectiveness, and the term change management to techniques designed to improve people effectiveness, techniques that will help them to adapt or to adopt new mindsets, policies, practices, and behaviors to deliver organizational results. So oftentimes the person who takes care of that types of organizational development is called a change agent, is the change agent. The change agent can be internal or external. So what is it that the organizational development can be used for? Managing conflict. And usually the organizational development expert's a consultant with a background in some sort of behavioral sciences, sociology, psychology, and they're brought in from outside the organization to help organizations deal with the different situations that you might find. So managing conflict, revitalizing an organization by changing communication, creating innovation, helping people deal with stress in the workplace. Stress is a very important issue in the workplace these days. and it's something that, if not properly managed, can cost a lot of money for the organization. And then adapting to mergers. If there's two companies that merge together, it's no different to a certain extent when two companies merge. No different to when two families merge and each have a different tradition and a different culture and different goals. And the organizational development expert can really help to smooth that transition. So how does organizational development work? Essentially, there are 3 steps: diagnosis, determining what the problem is; intervention, how are we going to fix it; and then evaluation, how well has the intervention worked. So during the diagnosis stage, what's the problem? Organizational development consultants or managers use some combinations of questionnaires, surveys, interviews, meetings, records, and direct observation to determine people's attitudes and to identify problem areas. And then during intervention, some organizational development activities for implementing plan change are communicating survey results to employees to engage them in constructive problem solving, observing employee communication patterns and teaching them skills to improve them, helping group members learn to function as a team, stimulating better cohesiveness among several work groups, and improving work technology or organizational design. So that's an intervention. So they diagnose the problem and they repeat those, they share the results of that with employees. And then during the evaluation stage, you want to determine if it's worked. So answers may lie in hard data about absenteeism, turnover, grievances, profitability, which should be compared to earlier statistics. And the change agent can use questionnaires, surveys, interviews, and such things as that to assess changes in the employee attitudes and compare the original questionnaire, surveys, whatever it is, with the evaluation one. And then, of course, feedback is always important. It's the idea: can you further refine it? So if the evaluation shows that the diagnosis was wrong or the intervention was not effective, the organizational development consultant or managers need to return to the beginning and determine, perhaps another path to follow. So the question is, does this work? So let's talk about one example in the restaurant business. So generally speaking, restaurants are really focused on day-to-day business, and that they don't really have time to think outside of think ahead. And so you want to know, so one of the questions you might ask is, what's more effective, promoting our happy hours or promoting daily deals? So in this one specific example, they found that happy hour specials drove customer traffic through critical off-peak times. And from an effectiveness perspective, it was preferred over the daily deals. So what they did was they analyzed sales data over 19 months for one restaurant, and they found that in this specific instance, happy hour contributes specifically to the hours of the day that are otherwise the slowest, driving critical off-peak customer traffic that's so important to restaurants. The deal traffic, however, is distributed across several periods of time, many of which are already busy, making it less effective. So they realized that they really want to focus on that one happy hour area. So how effective is organizational development? Organizational development success stories tend to use multiple interventions, goal setting, feedback, recognition, and rewards, training, participation, and challenging job design, have had good results in improving performance and satisfaction. Combined interventions have been found to work better than single interventions. And it's more likely to succeed when top managers give the organizational development program their support and are truly committed to the change process and the desired goals of the change program. So using employee feedback during the change process is one way to demonstrate this support. Always with all these, most things that happen in management, it's the whole idea of top-down commitment is really the key to it. So it's important that leadership is behind it. And if leadership is not behind it, then you're probably going to have a hard time. Change programs tend to be more successful when they're oriented towards achieving both short-term and long-term results, and managers should not engage in organizational change for the sake of change. They really should be there to produce some kind of positive results. So, change has to be targeted and planned, just like all other activities in businesses. And organizational development effectiveness is affected by cross-cultural considerations. Therefore, an organizational development intervention that worked in one country should not be blindly applied to a similar situation in another country. We talked about this whole idea of when we talked about globalization. But that's another area to be concerned about. So how is it that you promote innovation? You really need creativity and invention to keep things going. So it's the idea invention is coming up with something new, a new product, a new line of a new way to promote M&Ms, a new type of toothpaste, a new whatever. And it needs to be creative so that people are actually interested in it. And innovation, it has to be something, again, that is something useful and something that's remarkable enough and different enough that people are actually interested, the consumer is actually interested in buying it. It's different enough from what you're already offering and different enough from what your competitors are offering as well. So, how is it that failure impede innovation? People have a huge fear of failure. No one wants to fail, right? But kind of the bottom line is that you learn a lot more from failure than you do from success. So, some things that will reduce an organization's ability to learn from their failure is to play the blame game. It was their fault. Marketing should have done it that way, or R&D didn't come up with a good enough idea, or they didn't test it enough. So this whole idea of self-serving bias is this idea that you only look at yourself and you see yourself as very favorable and you see yourself in a positive light. You don't look at, and you see everything else in a negative light. You don't look at yourself as objectively or any kind of there's no self-reflection or self-analysis. And also the whole idea that not all failures are the same. Some could be preventable, some could be uncontrollable, some are more disastrous than others. Some are not really disastrous at all. You just have to move on from them. And then the other thing too is you don't want to not talk about it. So if you don't talk about it, you're not going to learn anything about it. And then finally, it can make you very reluctant to experiment, which is not a good place to be, because if you don't experiment, then you're never going to learn anything new. Okay, so there are some myths about innovation, that innovation happens all of a sudden, boom, I have this great idea. But oftentimes, it's like, a light bulb going off. But a lot of times innovation is a product of a lot of hard work and people really, putting a lot of effort and research and time into it. The second myth is that innovation can be systematized, but there's really no way to come up with new ideas. It has to be something that's fostered by the culture of the organization, and if it's part of the culture, you're probably going to be more likely to succeed. So, what are some seeds of innovation? Hard work in a specific direction. Most innovations come from dedicated people diligently working to solve a well-defined problem, and hard work that can span many years. So you have to make sure you have some sort of a well-defined problem. Then when you talk about direction change, innovations frequently occur when people change their approach to solving a problem. In other words, hard work closes some doors and opens others, so you want to make sure that you can look at the problem from a variety of different aspects. Curiosity. Innovations can begin when people are curious about something of interest to them, which leads to experimentation and inventiveness. Wealth and money. Innovations frequently occur because an organization or an individual simply wants to make more money. That's plain and simple. Necessity. Many innovations grow from the desire to achieve something or to complete a task that is needed to accomplish a broader goal. So you're required because of because of some government regulation, or because there's been an opening in a new global market, that kind of thing. And then this idea of the combination of seeds is that many innovations occur as a result of multiple factors. So it's rarely, if ever, just one thing that it's creating or fostering the innovation. So essentially there are two different types of innovation. Product innovation, which is, it could be the change of appearance of a product, it could be a change in what the product does, or creation of a whole new one. So, maybe, cell phones, for example. In the beginning, cell phones with, people had flip phones, and to send a text message, you you had to go, it was a very laborious task. But the change of the actual appearance of it, it got bigger, and it had a touch screen and all that kind of thing. Or you come up with a whole new innovation, the tablet, for example. And then process innovation, it's a way, basically internally, how the product, what are the internal forces in terms of the process with your employees and your management structure and that kind of thing. Okay, there are also core innovations, which is the idea of optimizing products or services for existing customers. So it could be small or large, incremental or radical. Essentially, the difference is in modifying versus replacing existing products or services. And then transformational innovation is a breakthrough that doesn't yet exist. So something that's completely different. Say drones would be a transformational change for delivery services, that kind of thing. Okay, so how can companies foster innovation? So you want to make sure you have an innovation strategy by which a company integrates its innovation activities into its business strategies. And this effort is going to encourage top managers to invest resources in innovation and employees to commit to it. So second, again, reiterating that strategic goals are unlikely to be achieved without the combination of top managers. Innovation also requires a corporate culture and climate that permit experimentation and risk-taking and tolerance for failure. Again, we go back to this whole culture idea that and the learning organization. Organizational structure and internal processes can promote innovation if they foster collaboration, cross-functional communication, and agility, which is also a part of culture. So some employee characteristics, not down to number 5, obtain the necessary human capital. That some employee characteristics that help organizations innovate are creativity, creative thinking skills, intrinsic motivation, and international work experience, as well as the quality of the relationship between the managers and the employees. So you make sure you have the right people who are open to ideas and have the creativity and the experience to come up with new ideas. And then kind of piggybacking on that is that companies that are able to make human resource policies, practices, and procedures consistent with and reinforcing of the other 6 components just described are more likely to be innovative and to have higher financial performance. So this whole idea, again, of human capital we talked about in the human resource chapter, you need to make sure that you empower your employees and give them the tools and opportunity to make changes. And then you also have to have the appropriate amount of resources. So if top managers want innovation, they have to dedicate the resources to its development, whether it's being people, dollars, time, energy, knowledge, focus, or all of them. So you want to make sure that it's supported, because if you don't have the resources, then it's not going to happen. Okay, so threat of change. There's always resistance to change. So sometimes resistance to change is an emotional or behavioral response to real or imagined threats to an established work routine. And so it kind of depends upon what's going on. It can be as subtle as passive resignation and as overt as deliberate sabotage. And as you'll learn, change experts believe that resistance does not primarily reside within the individual, but instead is a result of the context in which the change occurs. So it's a systemic situation. So resistance to change is reduced when change agents and employers have trust in relationships, faith in each other's intentions. Trust is really at the heart of any positive relationship. And mistrust, on the other hand, encourages secrecy, which begets deeper mistrust and can doom an otherwise well-conceived change. So next we're going to talk about reasons employees resist change, of which there are many, of course. Okay, so individuals' predisposition towards change. Some people just don't want change. Some people are afraid of the unknown. They're not, they don't want to hear about what's going on. They don't want to, they like the routine, and anything different is too scary. There's a climate of mistrust. Again, they're going to lead us down this path, and it's just going to be a complete disaster. Fear of failure, which is a basic human emotion, but needs to be gotten over, by thinking we're all in this together. That could change. That could help lessen the fear. Loss of status or job security. Well, if we start, you know, uh, distributing to a new area, is that going to be that, am I going to, now I'm sort of a big fish in a small pond, am I going to lose my status or am I going to lose my job? Peer pressure, people saying, oh, it's bad, bad, bad. Disruption of cultural traditions or group relationships, breaking up people who have worked together for a long time. Or perhaps, if you're no longer going to have, say, the sales force is going to be divided up differently, and you're not going to have your annual sales retreat every year. Or if you are, you're going to be doing it with different people. Personality conflicts, impossible to a certain, seemingly impossible to get around, but and personality conflicts. Whenever you have two people together, there's going to be some kind of personality conflict. So, for whatever reason, we talk more about personality and organizational behavior if you take that class, and those are things that have to be carefully managed. And you don't like this person for one reason or another. There might not be a solid reason, but you just don't, for some reason, don't like them. Lack of tact or poor timing, shoving people down people's throats, or doing it at a time that's not good in the business cycle. And then non-reinforcing reward system. We hear this over and over again, that you get the behavior you reward, and that's true in any organization. And even in the classroom setting, if you don't reward certain behavior, you're not going to get people to respond to it. And so if you don't reward, and it's true too when you're raising children, that if you don't, you have to reinforce the behavior that you want. We talked a little bit about that when we talked about management theories. So anyway, that's change. In a nutshell, we're going to talk a little bit. It finishes up the second section of this class, and in the next chapter, chapter 11, we're going to talk about managing individual differences in behavior, which will speak to some of the issues that we looked at also with this whole idea of change and people's resistance to change. Okay, so that's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next chapter.